The Lysan admiral divided his fleet for the attack. One pincer was to enter the gullet south of Dragonstone, the other to the north. In the early morning hours of the 5th day of the 130th year since Aegon's conquest, battle was joined. Jericho's warships swept in with the rising sun behind them. Hidden by the glare, they took many of Lord Valerion's galleys unawares, ramming some and swarming aboard others with ropes and grapnels. Leaving Dragonstone unmolested, the southern squadron fell upon the shores of Driftmark, landing men at Spicetown and sending fire ships into the harbor to set ablaze the ships coming out to meet them. By mid-morning Spicetown was burning, whilst Myrish and Tyroshi troops battered at the very doors of high tide. When Prince Jacaerys swept down upon a line of Lysan galleys on Vermax, a rain of spears and arrows rose up to meet him. The sailors of the Triarchy had faced dragons before whilst warring against Prince Daemon in the Stepstones. No man could fault their courage. They were prepared to meet Dragonflame with such weapons as they had. Kill the rider and the dragon will depart, their captains and commanders had told them. One ship took fire, and then another. Still the men of the free cities fought on, until a shout rang out, and they looked up to see more winged shapes coming around the Dragonmont and turning toward them. It is one thing to face a dragon, another to face 5. As Silverwing, Sheepstealer, Seasmoke, and Vermithor descended upon them, the men of the Triarchy felt their courage desert them. The line of warships shattered, as one galley after another turned away. The dragons fell like thunderbolts, spitting balls of fire, blue and orange, red and gold, each brighter than the next. Ship after ship burst asunder or was consumed by flames. Screaming men leapt into the sea, shrouded in fire. Tall columns of black smoke rose up from the water. All seemed lost. All was lost. Several differing tales were told afterward of how and why the dragon fell. Some claimed a crossbowman put an iron bolt through his eye, but this version seems suspiciously similar to the way Merryx's met her end, long ago in Dorne. Another account tells us that a sailor in the crow's nest of a Myrish galley cast a grapnel as Vermax was swooping through the fleet. One of its prongs found purchase between 2 scales, and was driven deep by the dragon's own considerable speed. The sailor had coiled his end of the chain about the mast, and the weight of the ship and the power of Vermax's wings tore a long jagged gash in the dragon's belly. The dragon's shriek of rage was heard as far off as Spicetown, even through the clangor of battle. His flight jerked to a violent end. Vermax went down smoking and screaming, clawing at the water. Survivors said he struggled to rise, only to crash headlong into a burning galley. Wood splintered, the mast came tumbling down, and the dragon, thrashing, became entangled in the rigging. When the ship heeled over and sank, Vermax sank with her. It is said that Jacaerys Valerion leapt free and clung to a piece of smoking wreckage for a few heartbeats, until some crossbowmen on the nearest Myrish ship began loosing quarrels at him. The prince was struck once, and then again. More and more mermen brought crossbows to bear. Finally one quarrel took him through the neck, and Jace was swallowed by the sea. The battle in the gullet raged into the night north and south of Dragonstone, and remains amongst the bloodiest sea battles in all of history. Jericho Lohar had taken a combined fleet of 90 Myrish, Lyseni, and Tyroshi warships from the Stepstones. 28 survived to limp home, all but 3 crewed by Lyseni. In the aftermath, the widows of Myr and Tyrosh accused the admiral of sending their fleets to destruction whilst holding back his own, beginning the quarrel that would spell the end of the Triarchy 2 years later, when the 3 cities turned against each other in the Daughters' War. But that is outside the scope of this tale. Though the attackers bypassed Dragonstone, no doubt believing that the ancient Targaryen stronghold was too strong to assault, they exacted a grievous toll on Driftmark. Spicetown was brutally sacked, the bodies of men, women, and children butchered in the streets and left as fodder for gulls and rats and carrion crows, its buildings burned. The town would never be rebuilt. High tide was put to the torch as well. All the treasures the sea snake had brought back from the east were consumed by fire, his servants cut down as they tried to flee the flames. The Valerion fleet lost almost a third of its strength. Thousands died. Yet none of these losses were felt so deeply as that of Jacaerys Valerion, Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Rhaenyra's youngest son seemed lost as well. In the confusion of battle, none of the survivors seemed quite certain which ship Prince Viserys had been on. Men on both sides presumed him dead, drowned or burned or butchered. And though his brother Aegon the Younger had fled and lived, all the joy had gone out of the boy. he would never forgive himself for leaping onto Stormcloud and abandoning his little brother to the enemy. It is written that when the sea snake was congratulated on his victory, the old man said, "If this be victory, one pray I never win another." Mushroom tells us there were two men on Dragonstone that night who drank to the slaughter in a smoky tavern beneath the castle. The dragon riders Hugh the Hammer and Ulf the White, who had flown Vermithor and Silverwing into battle and lived to boast of it. "We are knights now, truly," Hard Hugh declared. And Ulf laughed and said, "Fie on that. We should be lords." The girl Nettles did not share their celebrations. She had flown with the others, fought as bravely, burned and killed as they had, but her face was black with smoke and streaked with tears when she returned to Dragonstone. And Adam Valerion, lately Adam of Hull, sought out the sea snake after the battle. What they spoke to each other even Mushroom does not say. A fortnight later, in the Reach, Ormond Hightower found himself caught between two armies. Thaddeus Rowan, Lord of Goldengrove, and Tom Flowers, bastard of Bitterbridge, were bearing down on him from the northeast with a great host of mounted knights, whilst Sir Alan Beesbury, Lord Alan Tarley, and Lord Owen Costain had joined their power to cut off his retreat to Aldtown. When their hosts closed around him on the banks of the river Honeywine, attacking front and rear at once, Lord Hightower saw his lines crumble. Defeat seemed imminent, until a shadow swept across the battlefield, and a terrible roar resounded overhead, slicing through the sound of steel on steel. A dragon had come. The dragon was Tessarion, the Blue Queen, Cobalt and Copper. On her back rode the youngest of Queen Alicent's 3 sons, Daeron Targaryen, 15, Lord Ormond's squire, that same gentle and soft-spoken lad who had once been milk brother to Prince Jacaerys. The arrival of Prince Daeron and his dragon reversed the tide of battle. Now it was Lord Ormond's men attacking, screaming curses at their foes, whilst the Queen's men fled. By day's end, Lord Rowan was retreating north with the remnants of his host. Tom Flowers lay dead and burned amongst the reeds, the 2 Allans had been taken captive, and Lord Costain was dying from a wound given him by bold John Roxton's black blade, the Orphan Maker. As wolves and ravens fed upon the bodies of the slain, Ormond Hightower feasted Prince Daeron on aurochs and strongwine, and dubbed him a knight with the storied Valyrian longsword vigilance, naming him Sir Daeron the Daring. The prince modestly replied, "My lord is kind to say so, but the victory belongs to Tessarion." On Dragonstone, an air of despondence and defeat hung over the Black Court when the disaster on the Honeywine became known to them. Lord Bar Emmon went so far as to suggest that mayhaps the time had come to bend their knees to Aegon too. The Queen would have none of it, however. Only the gods truly know the hearts of men, and women are full as strange. Broken by the loss of one son, Rhaenyra Targaryen seemed to find new strength after the loss of a second. Jace's death hardened her, burning away her fears, leaving only her anger and her hatred. Still possessed of more dragons than her half-brother, her grace now resolved to use them, no matter the cost. She would rain down fire and death upon Aegon and all those who supported him, she told the Black Council, and either tear him from the Iron Throne or die in the attempt. A similar resolve had taken root across the bay in the breast of Aemon Targaryen, ruling in his brother's name whilst Aegon lay abed. Contemptuous of his half-sister Rhaenyra, Aemon I saw a greater threat in his uncle Prince Daemon and the great host he had gathered at Harrenhal. Summoning his bannermen and council, the prince announced his intent to bring the battle to his uncle and chastise the rebellious riverlords. He proposed to strike the riverlands from both east and west, and thus force the lords of the Trident to fight on 2 fronts at once. Jason Lannister had assembled a formidable host in the western hills, 1,000 armored knights, and 7 times as many archers and men-at-arms. Let him descend from the high ground and cross the Red Fork with fire and sword, whilst Sir Criston Cole marched forth from King's Landing, accompanied by Prince Aemond himself on Vhagar. The 2 armies would converge on Harrenhal to crush the traitors of the Trident between them. And if his uncle emerged from behind the castle walls to oppose them, as he surely must, Vhagar would overcome Caraxes, and Prince Aemond would return to the city with Prince Daemon's head. Not all the members of the Green Council favored the prince's bold stroke. Aemond had the support of Sir Criston Cole, the Hand, and that of Sir Tyland Lannister, but Grand Maester Orwyle urged him to send word to Storm's End and add the power of House Baratheon to his own before proceeding, and Ironrod, Lord Jasper Wilde, declared that he should summon Lord Hightower and Prince Daeron from Thessouth, on the grounds that 2 dragons are better than 1. The Queen Dowager favored caution as well, urging her son to wait until his brother the king and his dragon, Sunfire the Golden, were healed, so they might join the attack. Prince Aemond had no taste for such delays, however. He had no need of his brothers or their dragons, he declared. Aegon was too badly hurt, Daeron too young. Caraxes was a fearsome beast, savage and cunning and battle-tested. But Vhagar was older, fiercer, and twice as large. Septon Eustace tells us that the Kinslayer was determined that this should be his victory. He had no wish to share the glory with his brothers, nor any other man. Nor could he be gainsaid, for until Aegon II rose from his bed to take up his sword again, the regency and rule were Aemond's. True to his resolve, the prince rode forth from the Gate of the Gods within a fortnight, at the head of a host 4,000 strong. 16 days' march to Harrenhal, he proclaimed. On the 17th, we will feast inside Black Heron's hall, whilst my uncle's head looks down from my spear. And across the realm, obedient to his command, Jason Lannister, Lord of Castle Rock, poured down out of the western hills, descending with all his power upon the Red Fork in the heart of the Riverlands. The lords of the Trident had no choice but to turn and meet him. Daemon Targaryen was too old and seasoned a battler to sit idly by and let himself be penned up inside walls, even walls as massive as Harrenhal's. The prince still had friends in King's Landing, and word of his nephew's plans had reached him even before Aemond had set out. When told that Aemond and Sir Criston Cole had left King's Landing, it is said Prince Daemon laughed and said, "Past time," for he had long anticipated this moment. A murder of ravens took flight from the twisted towers of Harrenhal. On the Red Fork, Lord Jason Lannister found himself facing the Lord of Pinkmaiden, Old Petter Piper, and the Lord of Wayfarer's Rest, Tristan Vance. Though the Westermen outnumbered their foes, the Riverlords knew the ground. Thrice the Lannisters tried to force the crossing, and thrice they were driven back. In the last attempt, Lord Jason was dealt a mortal wound at the hand of a grizzled squire, Pate of Longleaf. Lord Piper himself knighted the man afterward, dubbing him Longleaf the Leonslayer. The fourth Lannister attack carried the fords, however, this time it was Lord Vance who fell, slain by Sir Adrian Tarbeck, who had taken command of the western host. Tarbeck and 100 picked knights stripped off their heavy armor and swam the river upstream of the battle, then circled about to take Lord Vance's lines from the rear. The ranks of the Riverlords shattered, and the Westermen came swarming across the Red Fork by the thousands. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the dying Lord Jason and his bannermen, fleets of longships from the Iron Islands fell upon the shores of Lannister's domains, led by Dalton Greyjoy of Pike. Courted by both claimants to the Iron Throne, the Red Kraken had made his choice. His Ironmen could not hope to breach Castle Rock once Lady Johanna had barred her gates, but they seized 3/4 of the ships in the harbor, sank the rest, then swarmed over the walls of Lannisport to sack the city, making off with uncounted wealth and more than 600 women and girls, including Lord Jason's favorite mistress and natural daughters. Elsewhere in the realm, Lord Wally's Mudan led 100 knights out of Maidenpool to join with the half-wild crabs and bruins of Crackclaw Point and the Celtigars of Claw Isle. Through piney woods and mist-shrouded hills they hastened, to Rook's Rest, where their sudden appearance took the garrison by surprise. After retaking the castle, Lord Mudan led his bravest men to the Field of Ashes west of the castle, to put an end to the dragon Sunfire. The would-be dragonslayers easily drove off the cordon of guards who had been left to feed, serve, and protect the dragon, but Sunfire himself proved more formidable than expected. Dragons are awkward creatures on the ground, and his torn wing left the great golden Wyrm unable to take to the air. The attackers expected to find the beast near death. Instead they found him sleeping, but the clash of swords and thunder of horses soon roused him, and the first spear to strike him provoked him to fury. Slimy with mud, twisting amongst the bones of countless sheep, Sunfire writhed and coiled like a serpent, his tail lashing, sending blasts of golden flame at his attackers as he struggled to fly. Thrice he rose, and thrice fell back to earth. Mudan's men swarmed him with swords and spears and axes, dealing him many grievous wounds. Yet each blow only seemed to enrage him further. The number of the dead reached 60 before the survivors fled. Amongst the slain was Wally's Mudan, Lord of Maidenpool. When his body was found a fortnight later by his brother Manfred, naught remained but charred flesh in melted armor, crawling with maggots. Yet nowhere on that field of ashes, littered with the bodies of brave men and the burned and bloated carcasses of 100 horses, did Lord Manfred find King Aegon's dragon. Sunfire was gone. Nor were there tracks, as surely there would have been had the dragon dragged himself away. Sunfire the Golden had taken wing again, it seemed, but to where? No living man could say. Meanwhile, Prince Daemon Targaryen himself hastened south on the wings of his dragon, Caraxes. Flying above the western shore of the God's Eye, well away from Sir Criston's line of march, he evaded the enemy host, crossed the Blackwater, then turned east, following the river downstream to King's Landing. And on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra Targaryen donned a suit of gleaming black scale, mounted Syrax, and took flight as a rainstorm lashed the waters of Blackwater Bay. High above the city the queen and her prince consort came together, circling over Aegon's high hill. The sight of them incited terror in the streets of the city below, for the small folk were not slow to realize that the attack they had dreaded was at last at hand. Prince Aemond and Sir Criston had denuded King's Landing of defenders when they set forth to retake Harrenhal, and the Kinslayer had taken Vhagar, that fearsome beast, leaving only Dreamfire and a handful of half-grown hatchlings to oppose the Queen's dragons. The young dragons had never been ridden, and Dreamfire's rider, Queen Helena, was a broken woman. The city had as well been dragonless. Thousands of small folk streamed out the city gates, carrying their children and worldly possessions on their backs, to seek safety in the countryside. Others dug pits and tunnels under their hovels, dark dank holes where they hoped to hide whilst the city burned. Grand Maester Munkin tells us that many of the hidden passageways and secret subcellars under King's Landing date from this time. Rioting broke out in Flea Bottom. When the sails of the Sea Snake's ships were seen to the east in Blackwater Bay, making for the river, the bells of every sept in the city began to ring, and mobs surged through the streets, looting as they went. Dozens died before the gold cloaks could restore the peace. With both the Lord Protector and the King's hand absent, and King Aegon himself burned, bedridden, and lost in poppy dreams, it fell to his mother, the Queen Dowager, to see to the city's defenses. Queen Alicent rose to the challenge, closing the gates of castle and city, sending the gold cloaks to the walls, and dispatching riders on swift horses to find Prince Aemond and fetch him back. As well, she commanded Grand Maester Orwyle to send ravens to all our leal lords, summoning them to the defense of their true king. When Orwyle hastened back to his chambers, however, he found 4 gold cloaks waiting for him. One man muffled his cries as the others beat and bound him. With a bag pulled over his head, the Grand Maester was escorted down to the black cells. Queen Alicent's riders got no farther than the gates, where more gold cloaks took them into custody. Unbeknownst to her grace, the 7 captains commanding the gates, chosen for their loyalty to King Aegon, had been imprisoned or murdered the moment Caraxes appeared in the sky above the Red Keep. For the rank and file of the city watch still loved Daemon Targaryen, the prince of the city who had commanded them of old. Queen Alicent's brother Sir Gawain Hightower, second in command of the gold cloaks, rushed to the stables, intending to sound the warning. He was seized, disarmed, and dragged before his commander, Luther Largent. When Hightower denounced him as a turncloak, Sir Luther laughed. "Demon gave us these cloaks," he said, "and they're gold no matter how you turn them." Then he drove his sword through Sir Gawain's belly and ordered the city gates open to the men pouring off the Sea Snake's ships. For all the vaunted strength of its walls, King's Landing fell in less than a day. A short, bloody fight was waged at the river gate, where 13 Hightower knights and 100 men at arms drove off the gold cloaks and held out for nigh on 8 hours against attacks from both within and without the city. But their heroics were in vain, for Rhaenyra's soldiers poured in through the other 6 gates unmolested. The sight of the Queen's dragons in the sky above took the heart out of the opposition, and King Aegon's remaining loyalists hid or fled or bent the knee. One by one the dragons made their descent. Sheepstealer lighted atop Visonya's hill, Silverwing and Vermithor on the hill of Rhaenys, outside the dragon pit. Prince Daemon circled the towers of the Red Keep before bringing Caraxes down in the outer ward. Only when he was certain that the defenders would offer him no harm did he signal for his wife the Queen to descend upon Syrax. Adam Valerion remained aloft, flying seasmoke around the city walls, the beat of his dragon's wide leathern wings a caution to those below that any defiance would be met with fire. Upon seeing that resistance was hopeless, the Dowager Queen Alicent emerged from Maegor's Holdfast with her father, Sir Otto Hightower, Sir Tywland Lannister, and Lord Jasper, while the Ironrod Lord Larys Strong was not with them. The master of whisperers had somehow contrived to disappear. Septon Eustace, a witness to what followed, tells us that Queen Alicent attempted to treat with her stepdaughter. "Let us together summon a great council, as the old king did in days of old," said the dowager queen, "and lay the matter of succession before the lords of the realm." But Queen Rhaenyra rejected the proposal with scorn. "Do you mistake me for mushroom?" she asked. "We both know how this council would rule." Then she bade her stepmother choose. Yield or burn. Bowing her head in defeat, Queen Alicent surrendered the keys to the castle and ordered her knights and men at arms to lay down their swords. "The city is yours, princess," she is reported to have said, "but you will not hold it long. The rats play when the cat is gone, but my son Aemond will return with fire and blood." Rhaenyra's men found her rival's wife, the mad Queen Helaena, locked in her bedchamber. But when they broke down the doors of the king's apartments, they discovered only his bed, empty, and his chamber pot, full. Aegon too had fled. So had his children, the 6-year-old Princess Jaehaera and 2-year-old Prince Maelor, along with Willis Fell and Rickard Thorne of the Kingsguard. Not even the Dowager Queen seemed to know where they had gone, and Luther Largent swore none had passed through the city gates. There was no way to spirit away the Iron Throne, however. Nor would Queen Rhaenyra sleep until she claimed her father's seat. So the torches were lit in the throne room, and the queen climbed the iron steps and seated herself where King Viserys had sat before her, and the old king before him, and Maegor and Aenys and Aegon the dragon in days of old. Stern-faced, still in her armor, she sat on high as every man and woman in the Red Keep was brought forth and made to kneel before her, to plead for her forgiveness and swear their lives and swords and honor to her as their queen. Septon Eustace tells us that the ceremony went on all through that night. It was well past dawn when Rhaenyra Targaryen rose and made her descent. And as her lord husband Prince Daemon escorted her from the hall, cuts were seen upon her grace's legs and the palm of her left hand, wrote Eustace. Drops of blood fell to the floor as she went past, and wise men looked at one another, though none dared speak the truth aloud. The Iron Throne had spurned her, and her days upon it would be few.